Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Um, go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on pre-diagnosis. I was thinking about my own pre-diagnosis feelings and experience when I heard the subject. And I remember it as a time of denial, a time of worry, a time of unhappiness, a time of trying to fill my mind with other things, hide my head under the duvet. So we're all of us very interested to see what your experiences were, and also how in any way you feel we could help as a society with people in that pre-diagnosis period, if they should find their way to us, and I think sometimes people do. I've got 4 speakers with us this morning. There's Martina Davis, can't read it, yes, Martina Davis, Judy Hayden, and Masood. And Martina's going to go first.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name, as you've just heard, is Martina, and I have a diagnosis of PCA dementia, which is posterior cortical atrophy, and that affects the back of my brain. PCA affects your vision, spatial awareness, sometimes word finding, numerical abilities, and whilst it's not particularly memory-led, there are times when memory has its role too. So you can imagine it's a very, very frustrating dementia, as they all are. But to put it another way, a dementia diagnosis creates a humongous amount of work if you are to remain as proactive as possible and maintain a quality of life. Keeping calendars, diaries and notes in order, and in my case, honestly, Operation Clear Desk policy is a must. I'm really pleased to be here to speak to you a little about this morning, about my pre-diagnosis symptoms. And I'd also like to tell you about what drove me to get the diagnosis and the memory I have as consulting room door clicked gently closed as the GP invited me to sit down. So to better understand me and help to piece together the jigsaw of who I was pre-diagnosis and the person I am now, I'd like to sketch in a bit about my background, because when you hear a little about me and you actually hear the things I went through before I knew what was wrong, you can see the connection was, it was dreadful. Being self-employed most of my life, I'd had a number of businesses, many that I'd actually built and sold on as good startups, with solid base for others. This meant I'd acquired a good set of skills over the years, and that enabled me to multitask. And most sole traders know that turning on a sixpence is right up there in the gods. I loved it. Being in the thick of things was something I did best. I've met some fantastic people over the years from all walks of life. And there's been the usual ups and downs along the way, but also there's been a lot of humour, fun, enjoying the challenges and finding solutions. Now, I could never have guessed that it would be the bit about challenges and finding solutions that would give me the best grounding I could possibly have, especially pre-diagnosis. And it continues to get me through life to this very day. I'd not long finished setting up and opened my final plan business, gallery for local artists. It was exciting times. Now, looking back, I should have questioned this more, but over time I lost the ability to write with my left hand, and I didn't think much about it. So I taught myself to write with my right hand. But sometimes it's really hard to describe how symptoms do affect you. And also with PCA, it is so random. I honestly, I kid you not. You would think if you're going downhill with something, that's it, you're going downhill with it. Some days are worse than others, or you could even go weeks without a particular thing happening that had been causing so many problems. For example, I was putting any number of things down, such as my phone, then couldn't find it, come back to where I knew I'd put it, and there it was, almost winking at me saying, "Fooled you that time." I had become really clumsy. Reaching out for things, I was misjudging distance or clutching thin air. A marvellous example of this was reaching for a glass of mayonnaise in the fridge. I never thought glass or mayo could travel so far. It was a bit like milk, honestly. Walking into things was becoming a good game played slow. At one point, I was absolutely black and blue, walking into car doors, doorways, fridges, kitchen cupboards, you name it, I was there. I took the precaution of tidying out a garage which was used as a shed, so I knew there were no obstacles in my way. Someone was cutting a hedge, and as I walked in, I didn't see a bright blue cable, so I had no reflex reaction. And I literally went crashing to my knees, and I badly smashed them up because I didn't see that cable. At work, I flew solo and did everything myself, and was finding accounting skills were rapidly becoming a thing of the past. And as I pushed myself to understand why I couldn't calculate, I became more and more frustrated. I found I was misjudging where steps were, when I was hanging pictures, etc. Dangerous Doris was becoming a byword. I worked out if I was writing or typing anything to change colours to identify a change of sentence or paragraphs. As I pushed myself, I found brain fog would descend. And brain fog is something that a lot of people with dementia completely understand. But I didn't sit back. I would find or invent strategies or solutions. It was about forming new habits. For example, on a personal level, I couldn't work out why I was getting things out of order, such as putting my makeup on. One day I looked in the mirror and I said, why have I got lipstick on my nose? From that day on, everything is laid out in order. And I've taken this strategy through to other parts of my life. And lo and behold, anybody who kind of knocks that strategy out of place, because it really throws me. I make sure everything has its place, so if it's not a good day, I can use instinct and my other senses. Believe me, showers and PJs aren't a good look, so I've got a solution for that one as well. You see, it's all about your own self-esteem and your independence too. And the piece de resistance that drove me to my GP. Well, I've always been a bit of a girl racer. And at the time I had a TT. I was driving along the Solway Firth, and as a lorry went past, the driver had a huge grin on his face and he waved. Oh no, I yelled at the windscreen. I glanced down, I've got my trousers on. And of course I had, but I couldn't remember putting them on. I was now fast becoming the strategy queen. I really was. As I sat on the bed in tears, I knew enough was enough, and it was actually time to get to the bottom of it all, and I pressed the surgery's telephone number. This is how I encapsulate my own pre-diagnosis. I felt lonely, lost, scared, and isolated. I could hardly understand what was happening. So I would question myself, was I therefore unreasonable in asking for some help or understanding even from others? I've always worked on the basis, if someone needs or asks for help, why wouldn't you want to give it? Every individual is different in their description. For me, it was scary. Some might use the word frightening. It depends on their symptoms. Here are a few more phrases. Why is this happening to me? Why can't I work it out? I feel sick wondering what's wrong with me. Why isn't anybody listening when I'm trying to explain? Stop shouting at me. You used to be able to do these things without thinking. People will say, for goodness sake, Martina, get a grip, and so on. I would like to end my talk by saying two things. Firstly, to the professionals who we couldn't do without, and then a message to individuals. Professionals, please bear with me. I apologise in advance if anything I say, which is based on my own personal feelings, experience, and speaking to others, is inaccurate. But please never underestimate the havoc and destruction that pre-diagnosis can wreak on the individual, their family, and friends. In reality, there are a huge number of dementias, and the more easily recognised and diagnosed are possibly smaller in number against those that have many different symptoms. And it's these symptoms which cannot be pigeonholed, that are leaving many people undiagnosed, lonely and isolated. Having said that, I would like to say that I consider myself to be one of the lucky ones. My GP listened, did everything she possibly could, as did the memory clinic, with their consistent continuity of visits and assessments. One of my greatest hopes is that one day, in the not too distant future, more will be known about other dementias, enabling early diagnosis and therefore allowing some peace to settle on the individual and their families. And to individuals, if you're experiencing or noticing anything yourself, any kind of change that feels out of character, it is really critical to have an early visit to your GP to rule out the possibility of any other disease or illness. Don't underestimate how scary a thing it is to do, but dig deep and find the strength and courage, because an early dementia diagnosis is vital if you are to make the most of and improve your quality of life. And as for that consulting room door clicking gently closed behind me, as I looked at my doctor, I felt relief. And I thought to myself, I've picked up the ball, I was running with it, and I would take whatever this new chapter in my life threw at me. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Martina. I'm sure a lot of the words that you've used and a lot of the experiences you've described so cogently will find their way into other people's experiences too. So Julie, can we move to you now?
Hi, my name's Julie Hayden, and I was eventually diagnosed over 5 years ago now, at the age of 54. My run-up to diagnosis was very long. I had been working as a social worker in older people's services, and so the majority of my clients had a form of dementia. But although I had that experience and I'd previously been a nurse, and there was a large degree of dementia in my family, it was all late onset, and I don't think I'd ever actually heard of young onset dementia. It's because the symptoms are quite insidious with me. The symptoms came on in my late 40s, and it took over 5 years for me to obtain a diagnosis. The early symptoms were around, I worked in a complex caseload in which I was responsible for vulnerable adults, and I was working in an office which was paperless, so reliant upon computers. And one of the early signs I would probably say would be struggling to juggle my my thoughts, and so be able to work my way through my assessments of my clients. So I would sometimes come into my work, and instead of sitting down at my desk and immediately starting work, I would sometimes sit down in front of my computer and think, I don't know how to turn this machine on. And I'd sit there for a while, and I'd go and make myself a coffee, and I'd bring it back and and sit and look at my computer screen. And I still couldn't work out how to turn this machine on that I used to work every single day. And then I'd sit and I'd chat with a colleague for a while, and then I'd look back before eventually I'd start to think, I wonder what would happen if I press this button. And so the screen would light up and I'd be able to be on my way then. But the general multitasking of the job became ever more difficult, and I struggled to assess my clients. But there was very little understanding from the fact that I was in a caring profession, but that I was struggling with my health. The approach taken by my bosses was very much along the idea that, not that, although I'd proven myself to be a very strong member of the team, that very much the attitude taken was not that, oh dear, Julie's having health problems. It was very much along the lines of, Julie is becoming a problem. And I did everything that I felt that I could do. I realised that I was having difficulties. I went to see my GP on numerous occasions with the health issues that I was having. And each time I was never sent for any testing of any kind, any investigations. Each time it was just automatically brushed off that, well, it sounds like you're depressed. Yeah, I was depressed. But I was depressed because of my symptoms. I wasn't having symptoms because of depression. And then, of course, being a woman of a certain age, the next thing that was gone to was, oh, well, you're probably going through the change of life. Well, no, I'd been through that already, and I told my doctor, but again, that was dismissed, that no, menopause can last for a few years, so it probably is that. And we had an occupational health team at work, and I tried to refer myself to that, but they didn't want anything to do with me. And we also had a counselling service at work, and I referred myself to the counselling service, and he suggested I take some time off work, but again there was great lack of support, and even quite a lot of bitterness to the fact that we were short-staffed at work, and what was I doing taking time off when they really needed bums on seats in the office. My condition deteriorated to the point where I developed a lack of ability to carry out my own self-care, and I had been quite physically active during my job, going out to see clients and so on, and traveling quite long distances. But I got to the point where I was so weak that I actually became housebound. And still, when I did go get to see a doctor, I was still no investigation was made. I was just dismissed all the time, and eventually ended up losing my job because of my inability to do my job, where I think if I'd have been given the proper investigation and the support, I would have eventually had to have stopped working. But I think I could have carried on for longer and just moved to some back support for my team, and so stayed a constructive member of that team, a supportive member to other professionals who would then be continuing to going out and seeing clients. And the result of that over those ensuing 5 years was that I was viewed as, by different health professionals, as that I was putting things on, that I was a bit of a hypochondriac, and I remained unemployed, couldn't even find work, just stacking shelves in a supermarket because no one would give me the opportunity. I think if the professionals are only more aware of the fact that first of all, look into symptoms, don't make any assumptions about it must be because of your time of life. It's got to be that. Always investigate. And if those investigations don't come up showing anything, look further, look deeper, because it is essential that we get our diagnosis in a timely fashion and in an accurate way, because only in that way can we get the support that we need to continue our lives in a positive way. And when I did eventually get to my diagnosis, it was quite a relief, because even my own family were doubting the fact that I was being genuine. After all, if the doctors were not coming up with anything, then how could I be being genuine? I think I came to the conclusion that I never thought, why has this happened to me? I thought, because of my professional background and because of my family background, I have a long history of late onset dementia in my family, that maybe that had sort of set me up to be in a position where I would be able to support others. And I've taken every opportunity to do that and to use the knowledge that I previously had and the knowledge that I've gained since by meeting with my peers who are also living with dementia, work such as my involvement with the Three Nations, and educating myself as to not just the more common dementias, but also the less common dementias, as it's important, I think, to appreciate what the needs of others are, and how diverse the symptoms of dementia are, so that it's not just about memory. Dementia is a neurological disorder, and because it affects your brain, because it's a brain disease, it can affect any way in which our bodies function, how we appreciate life, the effect upon our senses. And so anyone receiving a diagnosis, just offering support out there that this is not the end of your life. It's very much the beginning of a different type of life, but that doesn't mean to say that it's of a lesser quality. The quality that I've had with regards to the people that I've met, some of whom are on screen now, and the opportunities that I've had to be involved in education of care professionals and research and awareness raising. If you can share your stories and in any way become involved, please do so. And there's always room for another voice out there to share your experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you for highlighting the importance of the GP and of the employer, because I'm sure that that will resonate for so many people, both in good ways and in not so good ways. Matt, can I come to you now?
Yes, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, good morning, everybody. You know, the thing about dementia is that it's not a disease on its own. Dementia is a term, and it's an umbrella term, and there are so many different types of diseases that come under that term. And what happens is that when a person mentions dementia, two things come to their mind. One is he's got memory problem, and the other is age-related. He's old. And these are the perceptions we need to get out of the system, because dementia is not all about memory. For me, I did not have any symptoms when I was diagnosed. I had major heart surgery, and apparently after a triple bypass that I had, they do a brain scan. And that brain scan showed up my dementia, FTD, frontal temporal dementia. And that affects the front side of the brain and the two sides on your temple. Now, I did not know anything about dementia, and I was recovering from my heart condition. And I was told that, you know, we've done something to this, that's working okay, but this isn't. So you can imagine what I went through. And it hit me hard. I refused to accept it, because denial is the first thing that Sheila's already mentioned. That's the first thing that happens. And not having any symptoms of any nature, it struck me and it really hit me hard. First thing happened, I went into a lockdown. I stayed away from my friends, families. It took me over 2 years to actually tell my friends and families that I have been diagnosed with dementia. Two main reasons for that. One was the fact that I did not know much about the condition, and what little I did know was the worst possible condition one can be in. And that's the only thing that I could relate to. And I couldn't even think that I'd be in a place where I won't remember who I am, and I won't remember who everybody around me is. And that was scary. There are two things, in my opinion. You've got a memory problem, and then there is recalling, because sometimes you remember things, but you have difficulty in recalling. And I think that's the reason why people associate it with memory. My problem wasn't memory at all. It still isn't. And some of the problems, I think, have started since my diagnosis, because what actually acted as a catalyst to all these problems is the fact that I was diagnosed with a condition that to date is not curable. So knowing that you've got a disease that is not curable, there's only one outcome, that alone is enough to make anybody go into hibernation, stay away from people. And the other reason is that when you're diagnosed, you don't want to go out in a crowded place to see people in case you say something out of place, because you have got a diagnosis and you might offend somebody. So that was another reason why I stayed away. The problems that I have had since is that I struggle now with multitasking. I do have a little bit of behavior or, where I get agitated. I think that is because it's the perception of dementia that everybody around you has, and you are trying to accommodate, and that makes you anxious, and stress comes along. I think if people were a little accommodating, a little, sympathetic, that problem could be dissolved. I also think that that talking to people in the same position is the best therapy one can have. I, for instance, was in a lockdown, and the first thing I lost was my confidence, and I was scared of losing my identity, because that means a lot to me. And confidence went. Consequently, I couldn't face strangers. I couldn't talk to strangers. And the thing that actually lifted me up was peer sport. And the organizations like the Three Nations Working Group introduced me to all the people that have lived or are living with this condition. And I think that between us, we have turned the quality of life that we're living to a good quality of life. And in my opinion, peer sport scores, and it's top of the list for anybody that's actually going through this. And I would recommend that whoever it is finds a local peer sport group and join them. And of course, Three Nations are here anyway to join us, and then maybe we can educate each other and learn from each other, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same situation and we're there for each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think some of the things I've picked up from those experiences is the importance of the GP in that pre-diagnosis. If we have a GP that listens, it makes an enormous difference, but not all GPs do. And I think that GP education is really key in this. I know someone who's director of medical education for the Northwest, and she told me that the one session that most GPs missed was the one on Alzheimer's, because there's nothing that can be done about Alzheimer's, and doctors generally don't like incurable diseases. So I think we need to, as a society, we need to work hard to change the attitude of GPs. It's really, really important. And Matt, thank you particularly for highlighting how important it is to be with people, that sense of being with people who are in the same position. Everybody has dementia in a different way, but being with somebody who also has dementia makes a big difference to your quality of life. Being able to do what we're doing today, to see each other, to talk to each other, to share experience. So you wanted to speak again, Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it took a long time, but my GP has actually admitted that I know more about dementia than he does, because it's people that are actually living day to day that matter. And because it's a progressive condition, it changes. And you know when it's raining out there, a normal person, miserable weather, miserable person. And if somebody's got a hidden disability of that nature, it's sort of squared. That condition is multiplied. So it does have an effect on people. And with this condition, and I've often said this on many occasions, that, if you're talking to somebody with dementia, and if you ask a question at 6 o'clock in the morning, then that same question at 12 o'clock in the morning, and then that same question at tea time, you might get 3 different answers, because it changes and you don't know when it's going to change and you can't control it. And also, if you met one person with dementia, you met one person with dementia. We're all unique and everybody has got different issues. For instance, I've got FTD And I know somebody else, we are about the same age, and our issues are completely different. And she said to me, for instance, that when her grandchildren come round, she can't deal with it. They're too noisy. Me, on the other hand, if they don't come around to me, I can't do without them. I will go to them. And we are both with the same diagnosis. And this is something else that one has to realize, that every one of us are unique and different, and they ought to be treated according to their symptoms, if you like. I still don't feel that I have got the symptoms that some of the people have. And over this last lockdown, I have actually met something like 3,000 people on different Zoom sessions. And, you know, I couldn't even sit in front of a stranger and talk to them. And it was the peer sport that actually got me up, and I'm sitting here talking to you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything to add? Now we've all heard each other. Martina. Martina, you're muted.
That's it.
Okay.
Mac has said some things there that are absolutely, completely and utterly true to anybody that's out there listening, or to you all out there listening, as has Julie. And the one thing that the dementia diagnosis took away from me initially was that confidence that I had. I was always quietly in the background, but always confident in doing what I was doing. And that disappeared initially. And I didn't go quite the same as you other guys, which was kind of into lockdown within yourselves. I pushed myself out there because it was the only thing that I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do anything else. And from what I've heard since my diagnosis, and the interesting thing is I was diagnosed in December 2019, a week before Christmas. But the interesting thing is, people say, when were you diagnosed? Nobody really asks, when do you think your symptoms started? Because that's a very interesting thing.
Mm.
You know, that question, I think, if we look at Julie, your story, was, you know, what really wasn't coming out was, when did this start? When did this start to happen? Because I would have been able to say, well, actually, the issue with my handwriting goes back 5 years, let's say. And after that, this was where I found I couldn't put my makeup on. I had issues with getting dressed, or I was finding solutions. And I think that is a really, really important question that we should be asked when we go to the GPs, and say, look, I think this, and this is happening. I'm frightened. And where I was lucky was my GP said to me, Martina, I've known you a long time. You never come to the doctors. If you're here, I know there's something wrong with you. And I also think this is another issue which is really, really important, and it doesn't look as if it's going to be addressed. If your GP constantly changes so that you don't know who your GP is, how can a GP get to know you and know when you're going in and talking to them, actually, you know what? There's something really strange here. There is something. She is right. I do need to look at this, because every time you go in to see a GP, you keep reinventing the wheel, don't you? And as a person with a dementia diagnosis, as you've just said, Mac, if you ask somebody, because it's progressive, if you ask the same question 3 times in a day, there's possibly you'll get 3 different answers. And it's absolutely true. And I don't know how this can change, a bit like I don't know how they can change making GPs give an appointment within a fortnight if they're so understaffed.
I think you make a really good point, Martina, because I'm 82 and I've only had 3 GPs in my life, and the difference that's made to me and every time I have a need to see a doctor, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Rather than the people I hear about who've got a different GP every time they go.
Absolutely. And I just want to share this final thing, which I hope will give people hope out there about GPs. They might be like needle in haystacks from what I'm hearing, not just this morning, but across the board. I had a dementia review last week, and the young lady that rang up said, oh, you know, it's your dementia review. And I said, that's great. Who's your preferred doctor? Said who it was. And just at the last minute, I thought, I don't know your voice. I think you're new in the practice. So I said to her, can you tell me how long you've actually allowed for the review? And she said 15 minutes. You can't do a staff review in 15 minutes, let alone a dementia review. And if you're going to take somebody along with you, they will have questions to answer too. I fed this back very constructively, I might add. I fed it back to my GP. She was actually quite horrified because they are quite proactive in dementias and illnesses, diseases like this. And she actually said, because they take their training seriously and they have training days once a month, she said, would you be prepared to do maybe a 5 or 10 minute phone in? Everything will be, the mics will be open, which allows you to talk a little bit about your dementia and allows our staff to ask you some questions. And I just said, yes, bring it on. Because,
good for you.
Yeah, you know, one more voice is one more voice out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, have you got anything to add as a result of listening to the rest of us?
No, I mean, it was difficult for me getting my diagnosis. It's very difficult now because post-pandemic, it is so much harder for anybody to even get seen by a GP and to start that process off. And that we seem to be, I think as you referred to, Sheila, that dementia seems to be pushed further down the agenda because we're seen as, well, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. So being seen on the score of importance as to how we are viewed with regards to health services is very low, which quite pees me off actually, because, you know, after all, if we were given a diagnosis which was either a terminal cancer, or if we were being given a diagnosis of another neurological condition, such as motor neuron disease, we wouldn't just have the professionals wash their hands of us. We would be in those circumstances. We would continue to be seen and followed up, whereas it really annoys me that because it's dementia, that we are kind of just pushed to one side and written off. And it's absolutely wonderful that your practice, Martina, is open to saying, well, would you like to come along and speak to us and have input to our in-house training? That's what we need more of, more input where people can come along, speak of their experiences of dementia and give that lived experience voice to the professionals, because unless you actually hear that, it's difficult to relate it to a person. And our experience of having these webinars is that the professionals constantly feed back that, whereas obviously they value their professional training, what they value from these webinars is hearing from that lived experience voice as to what our experiences are with regards to all the different areas of dementia, how it's lived, and what our experience of service is. So it can only benefit the professionals as well as benefit us with regards to better quality service.
Thank you. Matt, have you got any extra words for us?
I think the most important thing is that realizing that dementia is not just about memory. We are all unique, everybody's got different issues. And there is still me in that dementia. I'm still a person. Now, because this disability is hidden, you know, and most people automatically assume that either you're okay, there's nothing wrong with you. So if you ask for help, you have to explain the fact that you've got a hidden disability. And it is also difficult for a person with diagnosis of dementia to actually admit to a stranger that he's got dementia and he needs help. Because we don't know what that other person knows about dementia or what help he can provide. Because most people, once again, think of the worst possible scenario and you're ignored. And that happens even with the professionals. Because when you're diagnosed, you know, basically you're told, right, okay, you've got dementia, go home, sort your finances out and wait for the end. There's no real support that's there for them at the outset. Knowing what I know about dementia today, had I known that at my diagnosis in 2010, I would not have stopped work. I would have been more active in making this awareness. And indeed, I would not have locked myself in, because I believe that there is life with dementia, and with the right support, you can make it a good quality life. And I think people should not be scared of the fact and think, oh no, I've got dementia, it's the end. I think we need to spend a little bit more time and really and truly connect with the organizations like this to actually educate ourselves about the condition and then maybe spread the word around. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that I can't remember, I've got dementia, so I've forgotten who it was who said it, but there was someone who spoke about parity with other illnesses. And I think that's really thought-provoking when you have a look at it. Years ago, I met Andy Burnham when he was Deputy Secretary for Health at a dementia gathering in London. And he said that his aim for dementia was that it received the same seriousness as people having a diagnosis of cancer. And I met him 8 years later and asked him if anything had happened. And he gave me a one-word answer. Guess what it was? No. There'd been no change at all. That most other diseases, serious life-changing diseases, had far, far more input from medical services than dementia did, which, considering how many of us there are, is a frightening conclusion to reach. Martina. You're muted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we think this is possibly to do with this incredibly inaccurate view that dementia is actually part of the aging process, that people with dementia actually can't laugh, can't do anything, can't actually articulate? Yes, I find word finding sometimes difficult a lot these days. But I do feel that sometimes we're not taken seriously. Our ages are not taken seriously, because if they were, then actually something would be done about it. But then on the other hand, does any government or politician want to do anything about it? Because if they did, they would be opening a real Pandora's box, wouldn't they?
Yes. Julie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I remember going down to my own GP surgery for a review once with a practice nurse, and I sat down with her and I was having a chat and talking to her, and this was kind of about 3 years after my diagnosis. And she actually turned around to me as I was talking to her and said, "Oh, Julie, I don't really think you've got dementia." She said, "After all, you can still communicate." And I thought, oh my God. And this is supposed to be a healthcare professional. How dare she be so patronizing?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my happiest memories of in my dementia life, so to speak, was being in a restaurant in London with a whole group of people who'd just been, I think it was probably a Three Nations group. And to say we were raucous would be an understatement. The wine and the gin had flown. And I went to ladies, and a woman who'd been sitting quietly having a meal near to us came and sort of, we were washing our hands in the sinks. And I apologized and said, I'm really sorry. We're a group of people who have dementia and we don't often get together. And she said, well, if that's what dementia is like, bring it on. And I think that idea that life could still be as good as it is when you have dementia is something that we need to keep repeating, because it has a beginning, a middle and an end, and all the way along the journey things can still be very good. There is life after dementia, and it can be a very good life if we let it. Martina.
Yeah, I've really got to share with this one with you, and it's very short. Another thing that I have difficulty with is hand-eye coordination. So it's not unusual. I've stopped wearing white t-shirts, let's put it this way, if I'm eating a spaghetti bolognese, because I'd look down and I think, oh God, there goes a t-shirt again. So it's just, you can't, it doesn't happen all the time. So I've come up with this solution, queen of the solutions again, and I look for the most fantastic paper napkins I can find, so that, I'm not ashamed of this. This is me now. It's part of me. Can't help it. Can't change it. Live with it. Work with it. And my best find has been, I am gintastic.
I love it. Well, we're very nearly coming to the end. We've got 3 minutes. So if you want to share a last word, that would be great. Matt.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm conscious of the time. I would just like to say that for the audiences, that these webinars are run by people living with dementia. Every single one of us here today has got the diagnosis. And it's your input that we're looking for, really. And we would like you to give us the feedback, and indeed even a subject that you want us to discuss on these webinars or talk about. And you've got the link there to actually watch this again. Please do, and do keep us posted with your remarks, your comments, and your suggestions, and maybe we can cover that topic. If any questions have been missed, we will look around and see if we can answer them for you. And if anybody does want to ask any questions, you've got the link there, and please give us your feedback. We need it.
Matt, as you've done so often, you've taken the words out of my mouth, because I was asked to remind people to give that feedback, because apparently the forms haven't been coming through lately. So please let us have them. So it's time to go. It's been lovely to see you all. Like the woman used to say on the Morecambe and Wise show, goodbye and I love you all.